Tons to talk about today, but we could start with the 4060 Ti 16GB model. Well, reviews of it have been hard to come by because apparently Nvidia is scared of what they'll say. Board partners also not shipping out review samples. However, here at Tech Power Up, they're reporting on MSI did their own live stream style video benchmarking the new 16GB version of the card and actually saw it coming out marginally slower than the 8GB model in testing. However, when I looked into the details of the games that they tested, it seemed clear that they were not testing many games that tend to go over an 8GB VRAM buffer, which is where the extra 8GB would pay off in the 16GB version. Now, I've been trying to buy one of these, but so far, at least in the US, on any website I've checked, I even went in person to a Best Buy to see if they had one in stock. I have not actually been able to find a 16GB card come into stock. However, breaking news right after I tell you about today's sponsor. A huge thank you to REDMAGIC for sending me over the REDMAGIC 8S Pro. Today's sponsor is making me the envy of all of my students and making my kill-death ratio go way up in mobile gaming. Let me tell you a little more about it. I game on my lunch breaks and sometimes during passing time between classes at school, and I am a teacher. I think most of you guys know that. Anyway, and my students get so jealous, and it's thanks to REDMAGIC, today's sponsor. They sent me one of their gaming phones, and it gives you a legitimate competitive edge. This is what my students just freak out about. You get these shoulder trigger buttons, which are programmable to touch anywhere on the screen during gameplay, so customizable game by game. I used to hate trying to play a first-person shooter on my phone because I just was so awkward to reach the shoot button when I'm trying to aim, but now aim down sights, shoot just like I had a controller. Legitimate competitive edge, not to mention just the high-end specs of the phone itself. Runs the game beautifully, 120 hertz, beautiful large display, 1300 nits brightness, and it has a really long battery life. So when I'm just using this as my daily driver phone rather than for gaming, I can it last all day. It has a notchless display, powerful specs, and guys, it actually has a headphone jack. Yeah, so many phones don't have that these days. It's great. Anyway, I'm out of time to tell you more about this for today's sponsor, but check the video, the link in the video description and pinned comment. This morning, I usually get most of my research done over the few days leading up to one of these videos, and then I check in the morning right before I film to see if there's any breaking news, updates, anything like that. It looks like Hardware Unboxed were able to get their hands on one of these cards and just published their review, and I think you should absolutely watch it. I will link all of my sources in the video description. They did look into some of the latest games where we do see on the maximum setting spilling over an 8GB VRAM buffer, and that's where you do see an actual performance difference with the 16GB card having better, a smoother frame time graph as well as overall higher frame rate. They also test games looking at whether textures are loading in properly, and I think really the most exciting thing about this 16GB card is just that because it is specs-wise identical to the 8GB version, other than having more VRAM, this does give a fantastic opportunity for apples-to-apples testing to see how badly is 8GB, hampering a card in certain games. So as new games come out, this will be a useful testing tool. Now, should anyone buy it? That's definitely the question. At $500 versus the $400 8GB card, the overall performance uplift is not going to make sense. And I'd really like to take a look at this in my own testing in a detailed head-to-head against the 6800 XT, which I'll do once I can actually find one of these to buy. It's looking like, again, I don't think the AIB manufacturers are that excited about these to get them out because they know about the value proposition they're offering. So again, I'm definitely not recommending gamers run out and buy one of these. Now, from my most charitable, is there a reason why this card isn't the stupidest thing I've ever seen to buy from a value perspective? I do think from a non-gaming perspective, there could be people who run, for example, now I'm definitely going out of my comfort zone on what I'm next. I test gaming. I don't really run AI models and stuff like that personally. But I believe, and correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, that there are things like Stable Diffusion and other AI, popular AI stuff where you will just crash and not be able to run it if you don't have enough VRAM, and these can be fairly VRAM intensive. So it is possible that getting a 16 gigabyte Nvidia GPU for specific Nvidia productivity support actually could be useful in some productivity tasks like that, where the $500 could more be seen as a budget option to get a 16 gigabyte Nvidia card that can then support some of these like AI model type things, or maybe there's other productivity workloads where you just couldn't do that with less VRAM. So maybe there is a place for this in the market somewhere, but certainly for the gaming market, this, I think, maybe should have been what the card... There shouldn't have been an 8 gigabyte model, right? If you have to do the 128-bit bus, so a lot of people are like, why is it 16 and not like 10 or 12? If you have a 128-bit bus, which was a design decision that NVIDIA chose to go with, you basically can go with 8 or 16. And 16 requires going into weird clamshell mode, that kind of a thing, where you put the memory modules on the back. So that's why they didn't go with 16 initially, but if you want to charge $400 for the card like they did initially, I think they should have gone with 16, and charging $500 for the 16 gigabyte model, given its actual gaming performance, doesn't make sense at all from a gaming perspective. Anyway, let's move on to AMD rumors. So this is definitely leaks, rumors, massive grain of salt, all of that. So over at Notebook Check, I found an article looking at leaked benchmark numbers for the rumored upcoming, because these are still not even official, RX 7800 and RX 7700 from AMD. Now the headline here is comparing the 7800 to the 4070, saying it wins by 5.2%, and the 7700 beats the 4060 Ti by 15%, but in what tests? So and where is this information even coming from? So it's looking like these are 3D Mark results, so TimeSpy results from some kind of a leaker on Twitter, it looks like. The source is All the Watts. Now, I'm not recognizing this source as one that I can give you any kind of opinion on their track record for accurate leaks. I report on leaks a lot for the last 2.5 years, and I don't remember the name All the Watts popping up on any major leak. Of course, I could be misremembering, but that's where I'm at here. Now, if we then take these numbers and pretend that they're worth listening to, and maybe they are, okay, then Harukaze on Twitter, who does pop up in the leaks and rumors space quite a bit, has then put those results into more useful comparison. Gives us some of this comparison data to stack up against, right? So we can see results for the 4070 Ti, 4070, 4060 Ti, and 4060. We can also see, and here's our AMD cards here with the rumored 7800 and rumored 7700 results up against the 7900 XT and 7600, where you can see a fairly linear scaling between these cards, although a bit of an extra bump going up to that XT if you just kind of look at it visually there. But then I think it's very interesting looking at this up against the 6800 XT and 6800. And then we also get some 3000 series NVIDIA GPUs here in the mix. So again, before we dwell way too much on this, again, this is a rumored score that could just be wrong. Even if this is a real result, the rumored launch date for this card isn't until September, which again, could still be wrong. That's a rumor too, but that means that this could be some very early results, that kind of a thing. Also, even if this is all perfectly legit and real, this is synthetic benchmarks, right? This is 3D Mark, this is not actual gaming numbers. And with all of that being said, let's look at how it stacks up anyway, because it's interesting. Okay, the 7800 here is giving us just under 19,000, whereas our 6800 XT result is giving us just under 19,000. Okay, 18,711 versus 18,957. there is not a big difference between the 7800 and the 6800 XT. And while the 6800 XT, they're listing here with the $650 MSRP, in the actual current market, you can find them for around $500 in the US. Which means that if the 7800 actually performs only within a few percent of the 6800 XT, it doesn't make sense to me if it comes in for more than $500. Just due to the fact that, okay, so let me put it this way. It would make sense to me given how AMD has priced things, that they may price it higher than $500. But I think that if they do, its review will basically be, meh, you could have bought a 6800 XT for basically the same performance and the same price for a long time now. So this isn't really doing anything to disrupt the market. So this maybe only makes sense if the 6800 XT kind of leaves the market. Now, if they end up charging way too much for this, like $600 or $700, it'll be a joke. If it comes in, the closer it comes into the $500 mark, at least it seems to be more like, well, okay, you know, I guess it's a 6800 XT with an AV1 encoder. Now, the 7700, we're seeing about 15,500, which puts it slower than the RX 6800, which in the current market, there's not a lot of supply. It kind of bounces around between $400 and $500, not usually too close to 400 though, more like 450. Again, the MSRP was more like 579. I'd also be curious how it goes up against the 6700 XT, because again, this is slower than a 6800, and the 6700 XT has been kind of the value card a lot of people have been talking about with the, actually on Prime Day, it was down at $300 plus Starfield. So again, that's kind of the issue with these cards. Now, even if these rumors are completely made up, like if these scores are completely faked, these are reasonable approximations for what you would expect if you just look at this visual graph, right? If we're going to have somewhat even scaling between the 7600, 7700, 7800, and 7900 XT, this is kind of the ballpark it would put it in, which is why I've always said all along that the issue with these cards is that the 6700 XT and 6800 XT have already been discounted enough that where it's like, well, what's the point for these new ones? And this seems to be pointing towards that still being in... one way to interpret it. Now, again, this is all leaks and rumors, so I've probably talked about it enough. So let's move on to another leak and rumor. So there's also been a rumor of a 7900 not XT. So we already have a 7900 XTX and a 7900 XT, but what about a 7900? There's been talks about a 7900 card where, okay, so your 7900 XTX is 96 compute units, and then the 7900 XT is 84 compute units, and again on the Navi 31 die. The rumored 7800 that we're seeing here would not be on Navi 31, these would be down on Navi 32. But there has been rumors of another Navi 31 chip that's maybe cut down to like 80 compute units. What's going on with that? Well, there's also now a rumor of a 7900 GRE. So what is that? And again, this is rumors. So that would be Golden Rabbit Edition, which would be limited to the Chinese market. Now, this would be following up on something that has happened in the past with an RX 590 Golden Mouse Edition, which, again, these rat and mouse namings are coming from the Chinese calendar, where we had in 2020 the year of the rat, and then now in 2023, I guess we're on the year of the rabbit. So anyway, basically there's rumors of a 7900 GRE, and there's rumors of this, maybe 80 CU version of the Navi 31 chip. And then these rumors are kind of putting it together as, so is this maybe what that is? Who knows? But I thought I'd throw that rumor out there as well. Now, also in the, how about we go into some non-rumors for a second with some, a couple interesting stories. So jumping over to CPUs here for a second. So there is a new BIOS update available for several motherboards for the AM5 platform, so Ryzen 7000 CPUs, where apparently it now supports much higher DDR5 memory speeds. For example, there's this article from Tech Power Up mentioning that Gigabyte is now offering a press release claiming up to DDR5 XMP 8000 with this latest BIOS update, which really has not been stable on the AM5 platform up to this point. So the question then is, though, first of all, is it stable, and is it worth it? Do you get any kind of meaningful performance bump? And again, I focus on gaming workloads, so I haven't been able to get my hands on any of this memory and test any of this out myself yet, but I did look to see if anybody had. And over at WCCF Tech, they are reporting on some testing done by Quasar Zone, which is, I think, a Chinese language publication, where they looked at this new BIOS. Not all the way up to DDR5 8000, but they went up to 7400 and compared it to the results at 6200. Now, the trouble with this is that, see, at 6200, you can run in 1-to-1 mode, whereas on the 7400, they had to go to 1-to-2 mode, where the IMC speeds are slowed down. And so the problem then being that does the slowdown of going to 1-to-2 mode just eat up any performance gain that you get by going past the DDR5 6200, where you could be in a 1-to-1 mode. And at least in the testing done at Quasar Zone, that appears to be the case, where any difference in performance between the 6200 in 1-to-1 mode and the 7400 in 1-to-2 mode seems to just be margin of error in the testing. So there does it actually came out slightly slower, but it's within 1.1%. So again, could just be margin of error. And so that was on, and they tested two different CPUs, the 7950X as well as the 7800X 3D, and saw these same results basically on both of them, where it was just, within 1% of difference and was not showing an improvement. Now, that doesn't mean that maybe, going up to 8000 mode or something like that, if that's stable, couldn't maybe get you a bit of performance, but it certainly shows that, well, it's good to see increased support on these memory modules, especially if that just makes stability easier to hit and things like that. Don't necessarily run out and just buy yourself a DDR5 8000 kit just to assume that you're going to get some massive boost in gaming performance on the AM5 platform. Now, how about in Intel CPU news? Now, this is kind of back more into the leaks and rumor side of things. Igor's lab has apparently gotten a hold of internal projections for both the Raptor Lake refresh and Arrow Lake, which would be the next actual, so, the 14th gen is going to be a refresh of Raptor Lake, which we're not expecting much from. More on that given these results. And then Arrow Lake would be the next actual new hardware, but it would require a new motherboard, the next actual, real redesign to the chip. So Igor's lab is claiming that this is an internal projection from Intel. Now, again, this is not the final results, so final results could be different, and you also have to decide whether you trust the information, all of that, but it certainly is interesting to take a look at. Now, what are we looking at in these bars? So first of all, the 1.0 line is using the 13900K as a baseline. It's the 13900K, specifically saying it's at a 253 watt configuration, and that they're also showing the results for the Raptor Lake refresh in light blue, which is also in a 253 watt configuration. And then they're showing Arrow Lake also in a 250 watt configuration. And we're looking at the same, core count configurations, 8 performance cores, 16 E-cores, right? And what is that +1? I don't know. Anyway, but basically, we're looking at the top-end chip from each architecture. It's looking like the Raptor Lake refresh is only expecting a 1 to 3% performance uplift if you look at these light blue numbers compared to 13900K. Although keep in mind, other leaked information is pointing to the other chips further down the line, with the refresh actually getting more E-cores and some models even getting more P-cores, which would be more significant. But it's looking at the top end where they can't add in any more cores. There's just not room. They can just give a small clock speed bump, and it's not going to be too mind-blowing of a difference. But the further chips down could be more exciting, especially in a multi-threading situation. However, Arrow Lake, we're seeing Depending on the test, Crossmark showing a 13 to 16% uplift versus the current 13900K. Sysmark 25, 8 to 11% bump. WebEx PRT, a 7 to 10% bump. Speedometer 2.1, a 9 to 13% bump, 9 to 13% in Geekbench. A single core, and then in multi-core, a 16 to 20% performance bump there. So interesting stuff, but let's see. We also see a few other tests here, again, showing similar results. But what's more exciting is the integrated GPU. Now, I understand that if you're buying, a 15900K or whatever they're going to end up calling it, maybe you're going to have a discrete GPU, right? Okay. But depending on how this goes down the line, this is actually pretty impressive. So this is Arrow Lake's integrated graphics performance up against the 13900K's integrated graphics performance, and it shows it more than doubling. So we're getting into 2.3 to 2.4 times the performance in 3D Mark TimeSpy, and in 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme Unlimited, it looks like we're getting to 2.1 to 2.2 times the performance. So it looks like there is going to be a major update to the iGPU. But the actual just straight up CPU cores themselves are maybe a little bit less exciting of an uplift. Now, continuing rumors in the CPU side of things, we're moving over here to some Zen 5 rumors. It's looking like the Strix Point APU is showing some leaked photos showing off it as a 12-core processor. Now, that is interesting. What exactly does it mean? So it's showing, reporting is 12-core, 24-thread. Now, I'm wondering if this is actually going to be 4 plus 8, because as an APU, AMD has said that in their desktop lineup, they've been quoted in my last news video as saying they're not interested in going to the efficiency core type setup. But I'm wondering if that's what's going on here to get to 12 is 4 plus 8 with some efficiency cores, which I think could be an interesting move for the mobile side of things, where you are more power constrained, on the battery life and all of that. So interesting stuff. Now, again, moving out of the rumors and into some new actual news. Samsung has issued a press release saying that they do have GDDR7 up and running, ready for next-gen GPUs, and reporting 32 gigabits per second speeds and up to 1.5 terabytes per second throughput. So that's definitely interesting. So our next-gen GPUs could be moving up to GDDR7. Of course, we don't have any confirmation of any specific GPUs or a timeline or any of that. Yeah, I certainly think that this could be helpful for performance moving forward, and interesting to note that it is now up and running. Now, let's talk about Intel for a second. So I'm seeing over at Phoronix a report saying that Intel is preparing another Linux Vulkan driver for their Arc GPUs, which could boost performance. It looks like they have some actual performance numbers stated here from an Intel Linux driver developer, showing that in many games, we're not seeing a difference here. But in some games, we are getting a meaningful performance bump. Specifically, we're seeing about 10 to 12% bumps in Strange Brigade, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider getting, 2.3% bumps. So it's not looking like anything too crazy, but basically, Intel has been improving performance with Windows drivers. It looks like they're also doing so on Linux drivers. Speaking of new graphics drivers, we are seeing Nvidia did come out a couple of days ago with a new graphics driver. This is offering support for Portal Prelude RTX. So that's based on one of the popular mods for Portal. It looks like their Portal RTX is being expanded to include Portal Prelude. Also, buried in their announcement, well, not buried in their announcement for this, but in NVIDIA's announcement for this, they did mention that this also supports RTX IO, which seems to be, a texture decompression, it speeds up that kind of thing. I need to look more into that, but this seems to be their first implementation of that. And I did get an email from Nvidia saying that they do have a build of the game available for reviewers that doesn't have the RTX IO enabled to do some kind of testing comparisons. I'm not sure if I have the time or interest to get into testing that. Maybe you guys could let me know in the comments section. But anyway, looks like a few other fixed bugs in here, but they also, the real highlight is this was the one that does support the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte. And this is basically as big of a launch announcement as Nvidia made is, hey, look, in our graphics driver, it does now support the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte. Please don't talk about it. It seemed to be how that was kind of presented. Anyway, not a driver update, but it looks like Nvidia has rolled out a firmware update for Pre-RTX GPUs to fix some kind of black screen issue that had been being reported on DisplayPort 1.3 and 1.4 monitors. Now, honestly, I hadn't heard of this issue, but apparently there is a fix being rolled out, and again, all my sources will be in the video description. So if you have been experiencing these types of issues, I thought I should report this so you're aware that there is some sort of a firmware update that can help out with this. In other news, Chinese police detain groups involved in making counterfeit GPUs valued at $2 million. What's going on with this? Well, okay, so with the crypto crash especially, there could be a lot of used GPUs out there that may or may not have been treated well, but could fetch a larger price if you pretended they were new. And that's kind of what's going on here. And it's being reported that one of these big rings that are doing this has been, they have made some arrests. Anyway, it's certainly an interesting story, and again, just be aware of the fake GPUs that are out there trying to pretend they're new, sometimes even painting over the memory modules so they don't look yellowed, that kind of a thing. There's definitely some business there. Now, in pricing information, talking about CPUs, videocards.com reported that the 7600X actually dropped in price to be less expensive than the 7600 non-X CPU, and it comes with the Starfield game code, dropping to $199. It looks like on both Amazon and Best Buy. I did verify yesterday that this is the case and that it was still cheaper than the 7600 non-X. However, I will mention that the 7600 non-X comes with a CPU cooler. Which, maybe you could value in the $15 to $20 range for its quality, But in other words, if you buy the 7600X and don't already have a CPU cooler, you would have to purchase one. But you wouldn't necessarily use the stock cooler anyway. But I do want to point that out, that there is some actual... and maybe that also could be why it would be harder to discount the 7600 non-X, is because you're actually paying for putting a physically larger package with a CPU cooler out there and shipping that and everything. But yeah, anyway, do be aware of that difference if you're interested in that price drop. It is certainly, by the way, is exciting to see prices coming down on the 7000 series, because with motherboard pricing, DDR5 pricing, and now the 7600X pricing coming down, and throw in the Starfield bundle, maybe it's looking a little more attractive to build there if you're more budget constrained. Now, it looks like Acer has their AMD GPU up and running, the RX 7600 Predator Bifrost. However, their pricing feels like a joke. They're announcing it at 399 euros, which would make it more expensive than the current pricing on the much faster 6700 XT, which also comes with more VRAM. And as well as much more expensive than just other companies' RX 7600 cards. Now, apparently, people did reach out and ask whether this price was a mistake, but it appears to be that this is the actual price. It says the company has confirmed to Spanish media outlet El Chapuzas Informatico that the $399 price is intentional and not a mistake, which aligns with their press release. So apparently Acer doesn't want to sell their RX 7600 Predator Bifrost. I don't know. Anyway, in other GPU cooler news, ASUS, their newest Strix RTX 4060 Ti GPU with the 16GB version does cost more than many RTX 4070 cards. So, yeah, great. Don't buy this instead of the 4070. Like I said, unless for some reason you're doing some kind of productivity workload, which actually needs the 16 versus the 12 on the 4070. The 47 is going to be significantly faster. Again, I really want to get my hands on a 4060 Ti to test, but I haven't been able to find any in stock anywhere. So anyway, testing to come at some point in the future. Now, Sparkle, in other, again, GPU cooler news, Sparkle introduces an Arc A380/A310 Genie low profile GPU series. So again, just interesting that Sparkle is back in the gaming GPU market, making coolers. But they had already launched a Titan Orc and Elf model. Now their Genie model is low profile, and this is available, like I said, on the A380 and A310. It's single fan, single slot design, and low profile. So if you're looking for a single fan, single slot, low profile card, that actually could be interesting. Not necessarily for its amazing gaming performance, but actually I could see a lot of uses for these in video transcoding servers, maybe that kind of a thing. Anyway, let's move on to other GPU cooler news. ASRock has added their 16 gigabyte Intel Arc A770 Phantom gaming GPU to their lineup. So that is now there and seems to be available at $329.99. And it looks like ASUS is teasing the new GeForce RTX 40. Would I pronounce? I've watched this anime, so don't get on me about being that. It's the pronunciation. It's been long enough since I watched Evangelion themed graphics card. Anyway, so it looks like they're teasing a new tie-in with that kind of theming on a whole bunch of products. So maybe keep your eye out for that if you're interested in that theme. And some other kind of PC gaming related news. It looks like Overwatch 2 and maybe some other Blizzard games will be coming to Steam, although you will still need to make a Battle.net account, and that will allow crossplay with Battle.net. This is interesting to me because Blizzard has always, had their own launcher with Battle.net. They were one of the pioneers with that. Battle.net's been around forever. I remember playing StarCraft 1 on Battle.net. So. But anyway, it looks like they are open to moving things to Steam. No, I would imagine this would be too soon for this to be related to Microsoft acquisition. But anyway, it's certainly interesting news and would be a change in Battle.net games coming over to Steam. I'm certainly up for things being less locked down to particular ecosystems. By the way, on the Battle.net side of things and the Microsoft acquisition, well, maybe Battle.net, okay, think about Battle.net compared to the Xbox app on PC for getting games. I would be excited if Battle.net expanded to support all of the Game Pass and all of that basically Microsoft's app sucks. So it'd be nice if they could actually use Battle.net in some way or use its technology in some way now that Microsoft seems to be going through with their acquisition. Now we're getting another Unreal Engine 5 game out very, very soon. I believe it launches officially on the 25th, I mean, although I think there is some kind of early access ability here. With Remnant 2, however, it does not use Lumen. But in a developer interview, it does look like they use Nanite. So I've tested Layers of Fear as the first big, not big necessarily, but the first third-party Unreal Engine 5 game, which featured Lumen but not Nanite. We're now going to have Remnant 2, which features Nanite but not Lumen, at least for now. The developer's work quote is saying that may be something we consider in the future, but, that's probably just an answer that is nicer to say than just saying no, but maybe they would. I did take a look at the system requirements for it, for the game, and they look very low, so I'm not sure if I'm too interested in testing this one out. Again, this is only looking like you need a GTX 1650 or RX 590 for the minimum spec, the recommended spec only being an RTX 2060 or RX 5700. But as far as what the recommended actually means, this is one of those, old-fashioned system requirements where it's like minimum recommended. What resolution, what frame rate, what graphics settings, I don't know. So kind of meaningless, in other words, other than it should actually run. Anyway, I think that's what I've got for you guys today. Are you interested at all in Remnant 2 testing? The next big Immortals of Avium comes out, but I think it got delayed a month or two, didn't it? Anyway, that should be one of the big Unreal Engine 5 like performance crushing games. So I'm not sure how many of these little ones I want to get into. Like I said, let me know in the comment section. I hope this video was useful and interesting for you. Huge thank you to channel subscribers, channel members. Click the join button, directly financial supporting me. Helps me do things like buy a stupidly priced 4060 Ti 16GB whenever I can actually find one in stock. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.